Well, I do sort of believe that the first draft of history is usually wrong, and that, films are not immune from that. And I think if you look at early Vietnam War movies compared to later Vietnam War movies, we needed to have a moment as a society to really understand that. And I think the same will be true of this moment.
They waterboarded him 183 times. Everything they got from him was either a lie or something they already had.
If it works, why do you need to do it 183 times?
Maybe when the report comes out, people will finally see that.
I'd like to hear in your words, I mean, obviously I've seen the report and I loved it, but I want to hear in your words a little bit about what you cover in this film.
Well, the report kind of divides into two parts. There's the work that Daniel Jones did for the Senate Intelligence Committee when he was tasked with investigating the CIA's enhanced interrogation program, which began after 9/11. So Dan worked on that for about 5 years. And then there's also the struggle that Dan and the committee faced after he completed the report in getting some portion of the report out. And that kind of is our second half of the film. The thread that I tugged on initially was a piece that a writer named Catherine Eban did in Vanity Fair magazine, which really focused on the two psychologists who are sort of the self-described architects of the enhanced interrogation program, which they were able to sell to the CIA after 9/11.
For an absurd amount of money.
Yeah. And then once I started tugging on that thread, I was able to get in more deeply into some of the detail of the program and how the CIA was able to, use the program to kind of further their own plan and what the role of the Bush-Cheney White House was in that, and it kind of pools out from there. Beyond that, I kind of decided to use what Dan used, which was to, go through the detainees themselves and use the story of the interrogation of 3 detainees to sort of draw conclusions about the program, in total.
And I think one of the many things this film accomplishes successfully is the fact that it doesn't tip the scale of blame in one obvious direction. And I think that's really important in telling a story like this. And so how did you walk that line to make sure that you yourself were telling a fair story, because I mean, obviously that's a very big part of, of Daniel's mission, is just to tell the story, get it out there as is. And it really was evident that you had the same mission as a filmmaker. So how did you walk that line?
I think once you've committed to sort of telling the truth, you have to continue on that path. And the truth of the matter is, there's the report, which, Dan looked at millions and millions of documents, like a library's worth of documents, to try and really, construct the narrative of what happened. And it's a different narrative than the CIA's narrative. I think there's another narrative here, which is the narrative of American politics that deals with accountability and transparency. And it's a narrative that obviously continues to the very day that we're having this conversation. And to me, that was also an important story to tell, because even though this program started with Bush and Cheney and the CIA, and I think we have to look at the circumstances under which they did that, and we have to think back, to 9/11 and how this story started and how public servants reacted to that moment and their desire to keep us safe. And so there are people at the CIA who did amazing work to keep us safe, and the movie is not a condemnation of everybody who worked there. I think the nature of the CIA is very compartmentalized. So there's that, but this accountability issue became sort of my obsession. And I felt like if I want to hold Bush and Cheney and the people at the CIA and the psychologists accountable, then I also have to take into account that the Obama administration, when it came into office, even though it ended that program, it did not hold people accountable. Yeah. And it made a calculation, and the calculation was, Barack Obama said this. He said, it looks like we tortured some folks, but then he wanted to turn the page.
Right.
And that was a choice. And that, you know, and as John Hamm's character says, democracy is messy. And we all have to make choices, and our leaders make choices about things. But when you don't hold people accountable, you allow sort of, you know, a kind of culture to continue. And it happens in the workplace, it happens in government. So, you know, that to me became a story that I felt I had to tell as well.
Right. And so are you hoping a film like The Report has some sort of extra resonance in this post-truth era that we're in right now?
One of the great lessons for this, for me, when I was writing the script, was John McCain. You know, John McCain's speech on this issue is profound and moving and beautiful, and that's why I put it in the movie, because it's better than anything I would have ever written. And it came from a guy who lived through torture. Now, I don't agree on a lot of the stuff that John McCain did or said in his life, but that doesn't mean that we throw away John McCain whole cloth.
Right.
And so that's, I guess, I think an important part of, you know, what I think you're right in calling this post-truth kind of moment, is we need to be able to look at people in a little bit more of a generous way and go, okay, they were right on that, but maybe they missed on the other thing.
How do you think filmmakers, yourself included, are going to look at this current political climate that we're in right now years down the future, once we have distance from it? And I know it's hard to project these things, but I'd love to get your thoughts on how do you think filmmakers are going to look back at this particular time?
Walking around in this environment as any sort of storyteller, whether you're a person with, you know, a keyboard or a guitar or a paintbrush, you know, or you're a comedian, you know, I do think that it's hard not to live in the moment that we're in and tell the stories that need to be told. So I hope that people will research the things and try and get them right and not play fast and loose with facts. But, you know, we have things here that we need to, like, turn into beautiful stories because they're horrible things.